In December 2010, Parliament backed a policy allowing universities to raise their tuition fees up to £9,000 per year. Although the raise does not yet affect home students in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, the raise will affect thousands of students across the UK. Over the course of this documentary, we will investigate the reasons behind the rise in tuition fees and its impact on university finances, and why it's resulted in fewer admissions. What we really want to know is, will the value of a degree rise in tandem with the higher fees? Do students believe their education is worth a potential debt upwards of £50,000? And most importantly, are universities becoming elitist? In the current economic climate, it seems confusing to raise the cost of anything, particularly higher education, which is a gateway to financial stability for most young people. Without an easy-to-understand explanation as to why this has happened, we decided to find out for ourselves. We got in contact with a few government officials. Leighton Andrews, the Education Minister for Wales, Angela Burns, the Shadow Education Minister for Wales, and the Prime Minister himself, David Cameron. Unsurprisingly, they turned out to be very difficult to secure for interviews, so we set out to talk to the people it affects most directly, potential students and current students.
I'm Sam, I'm from Brimau and I'm doing law at Cardiff University.
My name's Dan Hellier. I study sound technology at the Atrium in Cardiff.
My name's Larry Morgan, and at the moment I'm studying in Bridgeman College doing a BTEC course in childcare.
I'm Myra Shoyambo. I do biotechnology in Cardiff University and it's a 4-year course.
I'm Chaz Sayers and I'm studying physics at Cardiff University.
The first thing we wanted to know was if these students actually know why the fees were raised.
No, I don't really understand why at all.
To do with government debt.
I don't even know why the fees were really raised, to be honest.
I don't know why the tuition fees were raised.
No, I don't. I guess it's something to do with David Cameron. It's his fault.
No, I don't know why the tuition fees were raised.
I don't know why the university fees went up. I assumed it was to do with the recession.
To get a better impression, we organised a survey to find out what students knew about the raise in fees and how it affected their decision to attend university. We found that a staggering 84% of university students couldn't comfortably say that they knew why the fees were raised. We carried out some research of our own and found that prior to the raise in fees, the government would give money to fund teaching grants. This money would then be distributed to universities, but it wasn't quite enough to cover all of the costs. So the government allowed them to charge students a maximum of £3,465 to help them out. In 2010, they raised this maximum to £9,000, and in return they heavily reduced the funding for teaching grants.
My name's Sarah Valkenbergs and I'm the Vice President and Student Support Officer at the Students' Union. At the start I was a bit like, oh, damn to the university, like blah blah, raising up the fees, but at the end of the day they were always getting 9,000. Before it was just that the student would give one component of it and the government would give the rest. Whereas now the government's pretty much turned around and was like, you need to get your funding from all the students and none from us really. So
in November 2010, a number of peaceful protests occurred in London, commencing with Fund Our Future, Stop Education Cuts. After several weeks, these protests did nothing to sway Parliament from approving the policy. While these demonstrations caught media attention, it was the infamous student riots that had people questioning the motives of protesters and condemning students altogether. When it was all over, 50 people had been arrested, 67 protesters were hospitalised, buildings were trashed, and students were still no better off. If you had turned on the news in November of that year, you may have been fooled into thinking most young people were reckless and harming their own cause more than helping. However, the people who we interviewed seemed to have very different attitudes to those who were running wild in London.
I think the riots in London made young people look quite bad because it's always referred to in the media.
I think the protest was a good idea. I went to the Bristol one, but there were a lot of like anarchy groups out there that didn't really care. They weren't even people going to uni, so kind of spoiled it a bit. I think lots of people jumped on the bandwagon for that, and it sort of got blown out of proportion. No doubt,
you know, people reacted, they were angry and things, but I think the riots were completely out of hand.
I think student riots in London made people look really, really bad, and because not everyone's like that.
Our school had a kind of mini protest thing where we just went around like our town and just had banners and signs and things.
It's definitely justified, but like violent riots ain't gonna change anything really. But it is justified, you know, frustration.
I would never condone violence or anything. I don't think riots are justified, but definitely protests, and it's just a huge change.
A steady increase of successful applicants to university can be seen over the last 5 years. 2011, the last year that the cap remained on tuition fees, saw the peak of applications, and in 2012, as the cap was removed, universities suffered a decrease in applications of nearly 30,000 students in total. Mid-cycle projections predict that the total number of applicants will decrease by a further 10% in 2013, bringing the number of UK students down to a much lower level than that of 5 years previously. In 2012, the Higher Education Funding Council for England cut funding to English universities, whereas the Welsh Assembly continued to subsidise home students. The number of English home students applying to university dropped by 6.6%, whereas the amount of Welsh applicants increased by 5.3%. This is hard proof that the cost of university is off-putting to potential students, and shows the first signs of elitism returning to the system. We asked a variety of undergraduates and college students for their opinion about paying the higher tuition fees, and here's what they had to say.
No, obviously not. No, I think I'd still go to uni.
I think because we want to do like medicine or something, you have to go to uni to do it.
Yeah.
So we don't really have much of a choice. I mean, you have to pay them.
It's like way too expensive, and when you come out of uni, you've got like all that debt then to like pay off and things. And no, it's not for me. So.
I was thinking about taking a gap year and deciding maybe not to go and stuff like that because it's just a lot of money.
No, because it was kind of like what everyone did. And it was before everyone started debating the price, really.
So we know that the cost of tuition fees has risen considerably for thousands of people, and we know why they were raised. But are we now expecting more from universities because of the raise, or is that expectation unfair?
I think because of the rise in fees, students are more, they want to see what they're paying for when they say, right, well, I'm paying £9,000, what am I getting for this? Because before, even though the university, it's put the universities in a very difficult position because they're still getting the same amount of income, it's just from a different place. But now they've got someone who's really looking to see what they're getting for their money. So I think the universities really had to kind of like, you see a lot more marketing, like positive marketing, where it's like pushing what's good about it and it's like selling its good points, and it's really trying to develop really kind of like, kind of new initiatives and just kind of career opportunities for students, so that like when they come out, the students are doing well, they're getting jobs, they're happy, they've had a great time at university, great student experience. But also then the university's got that as evidence, like in the form of statistics, to say these are our satisfaction rates, these are employability rates. So then it keeps their, they can keep recruiting good students and things. So I do think the universities kind of really had to like think and pull the socks up of what they're doing.
When we emailed Downing Street to request an interview, we got the rejection we were half expecting in a response from the Ministerial Correspondence Unit. They told us, the government believes that institutions must deliver a better student experience, improving teaching, assessment, feedback, and preparation for the world of work.
I don't think the university is doing enough to warrant £3,000 worth of tuition fees. I think you've got no other choice but to pay tuition fees. If you want the qualification, you want to get educated, you have to pay that amount. But I don't think it's worth £3,000 what they're providing, basically.
I think if you don't go to university, sometimes people are a bit like, well, they're not brainy enough to go to university, or they're not, but sometimes it is the fact that they can't afford it. They could be the people who are getting A stars all the time and things, but they just can't afford to go to university.
I do think they should supplement poorer people, but at the same time, pro-discrimination is not exactly the best solution. So if you had like across the board low-level tuition fee, then obviously it'd be a lot better. I'm not saying it's practical, but
I definitely think that the price you pay for the course should change depending on the course, because it seems as though, I don't know for certain, but I get the impression that it's kind of like a flat rate for all degrees, and it doesn't really make sense because, if you look at all of this, it sort of costs sort of tens of thousands of pounds, but someone doing maths, a degree in maths or like English, they're not going to have these facilities, most of the funds are just going to go on the teaching, and you don't want to think that because our funds had to go on this, we get sort of cheaper teachers. So it should sort of balance out, and yeah, there's other things with grants as well that don't seem to balance. For example, that if you do a fashion-based course, you have to pay for all of the material, and you don't get any extra money for that. That's just got to come out of your loan, whereas I've got all this equipment here, I don't need to pay any extra other than the course fees, but I'm getting the same amount. So there's a lot of things that seem kind of unbalanced about the amount of money you get from the student loans company.
Would you have still gone to uni if you had to pay £9,000?
Probably not.
Probably not.
I know it's bad, but I come in enough debt as it is, so
Yeah.
no.
I went early because then I would have to pay £9,000.
I wouldn't say it's worth £9,000 a year.
I think I'd still go because it doesn't really, you don't have to pay it back like fast, it's like over a long time.
We were just talking about this actually.
Yeah,
I think it's only, I don't think it's the course, it's just our class is
it's massive.
It's so big,
so
we can't, I don't know how to explain. Like if I knew what it was going to be like now, like my course with the loads of people, then I wouldn't pay it, no.
I don't think it's good. I think it puts students in a really difficult position, and it's really unforgiving to students who have like maybe a change of heart of what their course is and things like that, in terms of like, yeah, for the student who just rolls through the system as it's intended in 3 years or 4 years, it works perfectly because, yeah, although you've got a massive loan to pay off, you still can get through and get to whatever career you want. But if 2 years into your course you figure out, actually that's not what I want, you try and find £9,000 or maybe 18 grand or however much tuition fees there is to fund yourself for the other years. So
if I wanted to quit uni and I wouldn't get all that, I think I'd have to stick it and carry on with the course because it is so much money. And then if you lose all that money and you've just done it, you've just quit something when you could have carried on, I think you should just carry on doing it instead.
The main alternative to a degree is an apprenticeship. The government certainly believes in their potential, after announcing plans to create 70,000 more apprenticeships by 2014. But is that route going to help those who want to prosper in an academic field?
I'd probably look at alternatives, but you'd have to look at the pros and cons of doing both really. I'm not sure what alternatives out there would give you a career perspective as much as doing a degree.
I was thinking maybe an apprenticeship, but it's quite hard to get into the music industry through apprenticeships.
I didn't really think about doing anything else other than going to uni.
I do think it'll put a lot of people off. I know a lot of companies are getting pressure to offer apprenticeships as well as like a sidetrack to university, but still, it's going to put a lot of people off.
I can't imagine myself doing anything else, and if it costs £9,000 to do what I want to do, I would do it, definitely.
So it seems that while there are alternatives available, ultimately they don't fulfill the academic ambitions of some people. We wanted to know how much students felt like they'd be missing out if they didn't do a degree.
If I knew it was free, I'd definitely be more likely to go. I think a lot of people would. I think everyone would enjoy it more because they wouldn't have the worry of getting in debt, they wouldn't have the worry of doing anything. They could just enjoy it. It's just like going, well, you're picking to go to education really, and yeah, which you would enjoy because you're not paying for it.
If the fees were higher, if they were the new rate, then I definitely wouldn't have done one because it's just so much more money that you've got to pay back. And yeah, I'd have felt that I could do equally as well, having not done a degree.
I don't think it's fair, mainly because I can't, especially in the first year, because I can't use a lot of the equipment that's actually in the uni, and I'm not getting my money's worth basically.
You don't think about that when you're studying until maybe you finish and you look at the, you look at the letters or whatever student finance is sending you, and you, I don't know, minus however much it is you're in debt. But I guess if you're convinced you've got a valuable degree, then you're going to be able to pay back those debts with relative ease anyway. And if you've enjoyed yourself with your degree, then maybe that outweighs the debt you've built up. And also if you end up in a career that you enjoy, then it was worth being in debt for those few years because you've ended up in something you enjoy. So.
The future of our education system is not certain. Can the rest of the UK afford to keep subsidising their home students?
Yeah, and unless somebody comes up with a radical change of opinion, like I always think you've got to start grassroots. You've got to get education good from the start and then work your way up. Like they're always on about making compulsory to 18 education and stuff like that, but if they can't even fund people for university, it just ain't going to work. Somebody needs like a proper good opinion of what to do.
So will the change affect people's futures as much as we think?
Well, because I'm on a childcare course, I've had to pay £45, and within that £45 I had a book, and that carries out all my studies, so I can look in that book and things like that, and it's really useful. I got a top that I have to wear to placement, and also we got to go on a trip, and there's another trip coming up as well, and that's all within that £45. I think if it was any more than that, I don't think I would pay it, because we're going there to get educated and things like that. We're not going, we're not going there just to give lots of money to, and, as you said earlier, like, if we quit, we've lost all our money.
At the moment we're in a situation where if you want to go to university you can, and most people are going to university. It's sort of part of the culture now, like people go to university to enjoy themselves and stuff. It's become less about getting qualified and educated and stuff. I think with the increase it'll definitely differentiate between people who are serious about their education and people who are just attending university for the sake of it, sort of thing. So in that respect there'll be less people with degrees, and therefore the value of those degrees will go up.
It's evident now that as fewer people can afford a costly education, the value of a degree will increase. But will we see more prosperity from those who can afford an expensive education? And will those who are less fortunate suffer at the hands of an elitist system?
Yeah, I definitely agree that if there are less people with degrees, each one is worth more. What I don't agree with is how it's sort of being decided who gets the degrees, because it's the fees rising rather than it being harder to actually achieve a degree. Because at the moment it does seem like almost everyone's got one, and it's not that difficult depending on the degree to actually pass. So yeah, I do think that less degrees will mean that they're more valued, but I don't like the way that it's happening.